Welcome, everybody, to Building My Legacy podcast today. Today, again, I am with Kate Fitzsimons, and she is going to talk about resilience again in the workplace. And we're going to use the 3 R's to apply them to what do you do with the complaining employee in the workplace? How do we manage that? And again, we're going to use the 3 R's and use it as a tool in our case study with what do you do with a complaining employee. So those 3 R's, just so you remember, you take time to recognize your feelings, what it is that's going on inside of you. You reflect on what it is, and you look at all of those ants that Kate talks about, the automatic negative thoughts. And then take a look at redirecting your thoughts into a healthy, more useful pattern. So, Kate, I'll let you take over from here.
Well, thank you so much. As I said, I'm so grateful to be joining you all again. It's been such a joy to put together this series with you, Lois, and I really do hope it's having impact in helping your listeners begin to feel that little bit more calm, a little bit more in control over how they're responding to things that feel like they're just not going to plan, even whether it's at work or even at home. Of course, it all takes practice, but I really believe there's not anything that you can't coach yourself through in life using those 3 R's to manage your thoughts and emotions around any sort of unexpected setbacks that life might throw at you. So, as you mentioned, this specific episode is all about how we can better ourselves as employees and team members around the workplace when things get challenging, like deadlines are tight, or when plans get delayed, or when budgets get cut, or management gets sacked, or all this severe uncertainty around whether you're even going to keep your job on the other side of this crisis. Because one thing that's very easy to become during all that uncertainty and that stress is to become that employee that gets in the habit of complaining a little, right? And
yes, we've all
nothing is going according to your plan of how you'd like things to be. So it's very easy to focus on all the things that are going wrong and kind of beginning to fixate on all the problems rather than the solutions, or all the obstacles and why we can't do that rather than the opportunity and figuring out how we could do that. Right? So I do want to premise though with I do believe there's definitely a place in the workforce for people who are a little bit more of thorough thinkers, who tend to do like to highlight the potential dangers or threats or important things to consider before you kind of launch a plan of attack or take a certain action. So I'm not really kind of talking about those strategic thinkers or kind of devil advocates who do like to consider all the possibilities before you decide a course of action. But I'm just talking about your kind of day to day, all of us can be this way, like kind of pessimistic, negative kind of people that kind of complain a bit too much and begin to drain the team's energy and creativity when you really kind of need it most. Yeah. So I don't know about you, Lois, but I kind of know I've been that way. It's easy to get in the habit of it.
It's easy to get in the habit. And I think when we have something like COVID, and we have this enemy over there that's outside, and we just feel very justified in complaining and doing whatever it is that needs to be done or said. And then sometimes we have a boss that really everybody seems to dislike, and so we feel again justified, right? Boy, I've been in the same place, and right now I find I have to really check myself more now these days than ever, because it's so easy to have those complaints come out. It's so easy.
Oh yeah.
The elasticity seems shorter.
It does, and as I said, it's more and more when more like things aren't going and aren't being how you like them to be. And in fact, research shows that most people complain once a minute during a typical conversation. And a lot of us might think, what? Like, that's not me. I don't complain that much. But since I heard this statistic, I've been paying more attention to myself. And, it's not even like you're overly negative. Like, I hate the world and everyone around me. Like, I'm not talking about that, like full on, like complaining, but even just little ways like, oh, I hate it when it's this hot. Or, I hate it when drivers don't let you in, or don't wave when you let them in. Or, this is going on for too long, or that line's too long, or I can't stand it when people do that, or I hate it when people complain. All the irony of that. But like it's even in subtle ways we can just begin to put out kind of this negative, draining vibe out into the world, whether we're paying attention to it or care to admit it. Most of us have fallen into this habit of unconsciously complaining because the brain gets very efficient at what we practice daily.
Right. It
Right.
does.
And yeah, and given those ants that you love so much, the automatic negative thoughts coming from that negativity bias in our brain, because it's wired for survival, by default, if we don't pay attention to our brain, it's going to be scanning the negativity and what we don't like. And we also live in a society that loves to perpetuate the negative, especially at the moment, or the news is very focused on all, like, those dying and affected by the coronavirus, as well as like millions who've lost their jobs and how terrible and awful it all is, which is real news, but it tends to kind of really, I feel like, sensationalize things sometimes because the brain media knows our brain's very sensitive to negative news, so it knows it's going to get our attention. Okay, so it's easy. We don't want to like beat ourselves up and go, oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm doing this. It's just good, as we said, to like recognize that as much as much as we can probably identify a lot of people complaining around us, we can also be the complainers, right? And we often feel very justified about our complaints and want to insist that they're true. No, that person is just awful. It is just too hot. That is just so unfair. And I do hate that kind of behavior. But of course, what we want to remember is just because it is quote unquote true doesn't mean you have to focus on it. Like that's when we need to do that first hour of recognizing and separating out the factual circumstances to see that your boss not giving you a raise, or your client not responding to you, or you now having to work from home. It just is what it is. And we bring all the negativity to it with our ants and just letting them run rampant. And we need to recognize again that it's not an outside circumstance, that that's taking too long, or that person is rude, or, your boss is like too like micromanaging you, or whatever it is. Because we need to do that first step of taking back power over the situation and step back into that place of responsibility rather than freaking out knee-jerk reactions all the time. And we can't do that until we really recognize our own complaints as not being factually true out there in the world, but just sentences, optional sentences in our own mind coming from our ants that are very good at noticing what's missing and not right about right now. Okay, so I'm saying this for your sake as well, not for anyone else's. Because of course, as we then know, negative thoughts is going to create negative emotion for you, right? Like thinking negatively about someone else, like your boss, your coworker, your parents, like thinking negatively about someone doesn't then immediately jump out and fill them with any sort of negative feelings, right? Negative thoughts only cause negative feelings for you. So if you take a moment now that you've recognized that your own complaining thoughts in your own brain, not out there in the world, and then do the second R of reflecting upon how you feel and act when you're thinking these kind of thoughts, like my boss is way too tight, or the economy's such a mess, or my colleague's so annoying. How do those thoughts feel for you, Lois?
It's interesting, Kate, that we're talking about this because normally when I wake up in the morning, I'm a pretty positive person. This morning, when I woke up, I had all these negative tapes that were running in my head. And then they go to people because people are the easiest target. You want to hook something somewhere with the blame, right? So then but then that mushrooms because when you put it to somebody, then you can go into stories, and now you've got more
Yes.
emotion. And it was fascinating. I mean, I was fascinated by my own response and the need to really say time out, time to pause and just settle in, because you aren't going to control anything more today than you did yesterday. Just take a look at, what it is that you need to do and reframe it. But it takes that also being aware of, okay, I really am out of control. I'm overreacting. I'm having feelings, maybe okay, justified, but they're not helpful. So let me take a look at them.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the key, whether they're helpful or not. And a lot of people don't want to even recognize them as thoughts. They want to keep arguing with me, like, no, 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 it is true. They really are this way and they really are awful or whatever. And I'm like, no, this is for your sake, because thoughts feel pretty crappy for us, right? Like all those thoughts, like this is too much or too little or too hot or too hard or too long or whatever it is, like they create feelings like frustration and helplessness and self-pity,
You know,
right? And
one of the
self-pity is like putting a hole in the bucket and just draining you of any
yeah.
sort. As I said, creativity, we kind of wallow and so throw ourselves a pity party, and we're not really our most productive focused selves who are really adding a lot of value to the team or coming up with new ideas, or even just fun for our co-workers to be around when we're feeling a lot of pity and frustration, right? We're more likely to ruminate, as you said, kind of run to someone else and complain and get them to buy into our story and make it even more emotional and dramatic. And, we kind of shut down ideas at team meetings and say why it wouldn't work and keep our team spinning on problems rather than trying to be the one who opens up to solutions. So I think it's really important to think about the vibes we're putting out in our workplace and where the topics of conversation goes when you say things like, our boss is so unreasonable, or I hate it when she does that, or the economy is so bad, it's just going to ruin all our chances. Like, what direction do you think you're going to then point the conversation in? Like, how are you influencing your colleagues' next thoughts? Positively or negatively?
Well, it's amazing how you begin to, it's like this ball that starts to roll. And Kate, I have to just share with you one of the things that with your aunt's example of the automatic negative thoughts. Remember
Yeah.
how last week you talked about blue hair?
Yeah. Did you
So
use it?
no, but in my mind, what I have is when I start with all this negative stuff, I see this army of ants marching, 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 and they're marching right into my brain and out the other side. And so, when you create a visual like that, whether it's a blue ant,
No.
blue hair, or
Yeah.
whatever, you begin to
Yeah. I
chuckle
love
at
that.
yourself, right?
Yeah.
And it's in that chuckle is one way of doing an interrupt. And so
Yeah. It kind of stops the circuit of them spiraling.
you
Yeah. Because that's
have
what
to
it is.
stop somehow. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, no, I love. I'll probably use that visual now too. So, thank you for sharing it with us. And that's definitely, as I'm talking to some kids next week, so I'll have to tell them about that. The army of ants. But of course, when we are turning to our friends, our colleagues, whoever it is, like, of course, being really negatively, it's pretty likely that then they're going to just instantly kind of agree with you and compound that negativity, because it's part of our humanity to want to connect and bond with each other and feel a part of the team and kind of share viewpoints and opinions so we can build that common bond and feel included. Okay, so something that um, empowers me as well to really monitor how much I'm complaining is just reminding myself, like, what I choose to think and say out loud next, it doesn't just impact me, but those around me. And do you really want to reinforce a habit of complaining and negativity in your colleague's brain, your friend's brain, in your mum's brain, and someone that you care about and just want to see happy brain, right? Like, do you want to keep building up the habit of complaining, not just in your life, but their life, right? So, and I really think want us to think about that, because I think, especially right now when times are so tough for our society, it's almost accepted as normal to complain, like so normal that we don't even notice it. But Lois, we've created this podcast series for people who want to go beyond the norm, right? And want to be the exception in their workplace, in their community, and in this world, right? So they're the people that hopefully are still tuning in now after so many episodes. You really are, now passionate about doing that, being the exception by, firstly, another one of the ways is breaking this habit of complaining once a minute, which of course is only contributing to the negativity in our world, and recreate that new habit, which focuses more on acceptance and appreciation. So you are contributing then to more of the positivity out there. And where most people are just going to see problems, you're searching for solutions. And where most people dwell on the loss, you're finding what is left to be grateful for. And so that's where we're going to pull in my third R of redirect and share with you just a really quick brain hack that I've started practicing in my life. It's made a huge difference, that kind of instantly helps redirect your mind to something better. Okay, so do you want to know how it is? Okay, where can I find it? I need to find how the
I
best
love
way.
your verbiage, brain hack. Who doesn't want to hack
Brain
their
hack.
brain and to come out being sort of
Okay.
in control and
Yes.
managing it?
Yeah. So it is a hack because it's so, once I say it, like I even saw it and I mentioned it to you and it's like, oh, I've never thought of it that way. But it is literally instantly redirecting to the opposite. Okay. So in the sense of this, whenever you hear yourself saying something negative or whinging, like what you don't like about it, I want you to immediately think, okay, if I was thinking the opposite and what I do like about this, what would I think? So, for example, you can walk around the workplace saying how much you hate vanilla, or you can focus and say how much you love chocolate. You know what? You can say out loud to the person sitting next to you in the car, you know what? I hate it so much when someone doesn't wave when you let them in when you're driving. Or you can say, you know what I love? I love it when someone takes the time to give me a wave when I let them in traffic. Or you can complain to your colleague about how much you hate how boring that weekly board meeting is. Or you can focus on how much you love the freedom of getting to work from home most of the week. Or you can say how much you hate liars or how much you love honest people. Or you can say how much you hate turbulence while flying or how much you love a smooth flight, right? So we even right now, we can focus on how much we hate that we missed out on getting to share, Easter with our families this year because of the lockdown. We can talk about how much we love it when we do get to share celebrations with our loved ones, or how much we love it that thanks to technology, we can still connect with them, right? It's kind of just right when your brain goes to saying what you hate or what you don't like or what you wish was different, it's kind of flipping it to the opposite of what the alternative could be. That just feels so much better. Can you see the difference in that?
It sure does. And, I was thinking about it's like creating a process in your brain where a trigger, really, you need a trigger when you start down that negative path that says, nope, okay, what would be the opposite? Because you have to be conscious. It doesn't just happen, it requires work to do what you're talking about. We're not
Mm-hmm.
born automatically putting these things into place. So
Yeah.
it takes effort.
Yeah. Yeah. And I just love that simple one of like, for me, it's what's the chocolate versus vanilla? Like that's what I'm always reminding myself of. Like what flavor am I saying I don't like and what flavor could I like? And it's like, what flavor of life are you not liking in the moment? And what's the flavor of its opposite that you could focus on instead? Because that's when we need to really step up and remember, like as a human being, we have the freedom. It's our greatest gift to choose what our mind focuses on in this world, in our days, in our lives, and in our own mind. And we need to remember we can focus on what we don't want or what we do. And I'm realizing more and more, especially at the moment, of when we find something outside of us that we don't like or we don't want, it's just don't focus on it. Like there's no upside, right? Focus on what we do want and what we do like. This feels so much better, right? To be the person that it might be raining outside, but you can be like, oh, this makes me love sunny days so much, rather than being like, oh, it's raining outside, I hate rainy days. Like, that instantly goes from the miserable person to be around to the grateful person to be around in like a heartbeat, right? Like, you're just going to add so much more value to your team and be the someone that people really enjoy being around, and be that kind of person that, I always say, leave someone better than how you found them.
Uh,
And even just in those day-to-day interactions, walking past someone in the corridor or doing a quick Zoom meeting with them, like, how can you be that person that in the beginning, when most people's talking about, everything that's wrong, just going to do the opposite and trying to find what you do want and do like, in that situation, that you can talk about instead. So that's why I'm always doing the brain hack, as I said, of the opposite of, we can get ourselves there by firstly recognizing those automatic negative thoughts, reflecting how they're just not helpful. Like you said, as much as we want to argue and feel justified, it's just not useful for you or for anyone around you. This is something I'm always reminding myself, this is bigger than me. This is how I'm going to influence everyone who interacts with me throughout the day. And so then redirect your brain to say its opposite in a positive way of what you do like. And of course, this is not an overnight fix. Our brain has very well-worn neural pathways of complaining that are super speedy, and our brain prefers that path. But if you keep practicing this brain hack every day, firing up the different neural pathways, they will become more ingrained, and more positive thoughts will begin to become easier to think and become more naturally. But you've got to be willing to put up with that discomfort and the cognitive dissonance at the beginning, because on the other side of that, you, as I said, will become that team member that everyone's like, they're good to be around. They make me feel, they help us, they bring a good energy to the room. I don't walk away feeling drained being around them. Every single one of us can become that kind of employee, and because it's often we might want to complain that we haven't got the promotion as soon as someone else, but that ain't going to help you get there. You know what, Will? Going to the opposite of how much you love your position and where you're at, and how much you love the opportunity that is there, that you can actually be promoted, rather than just complaining that you're not. So it's all in the way that you place it in your mind. And I'm always just trying to be like, what's the opposite of this that I do like? And go from there.
what's the opposite? That's a challenge. And
Yep.
but what a fun game that you can start to play with your own self. And I think a lot of life gets to be what you're willing to challenge yourself to do. And part of it's just playing a game. It's playing a mind game that says, okay, that part maybe doesn't have to be true. I can make it up differently.
Yeah. Yeah. What's the opposite of this? It's just as true, but feels a whole lot better, because we live in a world of contrast, right? Like, nothing is ever just one-sided. Like, there's always like an opposite to
Right.
it, right? And so every one of us, depending on how we're showing up and where we're focusing our brains and what we're choosing to believe and choosing to let go of, we're either contrasting to the good or the bad, the love or the hate, the joy or the suffering. And sure, we might not individually change the entire world, but you can change how you experience this world, and most especially the experience people in your world and your workplace have of you, by simply doing your best to redirect your mind to the opposite. When you feel that temptation to want to whinge about how you hate it when your boss always runs late, you can say, I love it when he runs on time. Boom, instantly change the mood in the room. So yeah, every day can be opposite day if you choose to make it so.
There you go. That's our challenge for today.
Yes.
Every day can be a good thing if we think of the
Yes.
opposite. Turn a negative
Yes.
into a positive thought.
That's it.
Kate, thank you very, very much. And we look forward to our next podcast with you. It'll be the last in this series. And so we look forward to that very soon. Thanks, everybody, for joining us on Building My Legacy podcast today. And thank you, Kate.